Hello, you're listening to Paul on Awaz Community Radio, and today we've got Phil Aspden from eGenius, the Learning Technology Architect, with us today. If you need to get in contact with Awaz Community Radio, you can find us on our email address, awazcommunityradio@gmail.com. You can call us on 0161 839 9817. We have Facebook, just search Awaz Community Radio, and if you want to tweet us, we have Twitter as well. Awaz Radio 122, and don't forget to listen to us live on www.awazcommunityradio.com. Welcome back to Awaz Community Radio, and today we've got Phil Aspden from eGenius. How are you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Paul.
Doing good. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit about eGenius as well, please?
Sure. My first career, I started off as a librarian, but I describe myself as a recovering librarian now. And I had a very interesting career, ran Learn Direct for most of the Northwest, and then left that and set up my own consultancy, which was in organisational change and development. But I've actually come back within the last 3 years to doing what probably I know best, which is learning technology. And we set up eGenius because we felt there was a need. There's a need for people to understand how learning technology can change their lives, and people understanding how learning technology can change how a training provider, for instance, provides its training, how a school provides its education to its pupils. And it's because we're in a time of great change that we felt that it was a good business to start.
That's great. So can you give us an example of what educational technology is?
Yeah, it's interesting really, because we talk about learning technology all the time. The reality is that most technology is actually developed for other purposes. And actually, educationally, schools and colleges, etc., they use existing technology and use that for learning. And we're at a point now where I think we're just about to experience quite a big change in terms of training and education, because at the moment, technology is used to enhance the way that education is already provided. So if you've got kids at school, you'll probably find that instead of the old blackboard and chalk, what they've got is a whiteboard and projection and things like that. So actually all we're doing is the same type of education. We're teaching kids in the same way. We're just using technology to do it a little bit better. And then there are things like e-learning. And e-learning has been a real change in how people learn, but it's still on a sort of very academic model, insofar as people start an e-learning course, they do some tests all the way through it, and they come out at the end probably with a qualification. So actually that isn't that much different to going into a classroom. It's just a lot more convenient for people. So we're sort of interested in what the next stage is going to be.
Yeah, when I get the idea of like educational technology, I get the idea of like robots in classrooms and like big screens and stuff like this, and like all the pupils staring at a big screen. Is that the way that it's going to be going in the future?
Robots in classrooms is an interesting question. Yeah, I don't imagine that we'll see robots replace teachers in that sense, but we might very well have robots in classroom which are bringing drinks in or moving things around in the classroom. There's no reason why not. But I think what we've got to get away from is this idea of the classroom. Because I imagine when you think of a classroom, you probably have the same idea that most people have in their heads, which is rows of desks, all facing forward to the teacher. But actually there's no reason why we should carry on using that model, because technology can allow us to do things very differently.
Welcome back. So, Phil, I wanted to know what like the next stage of educational technology will be and where it's going to go?
Okay, I think we're in for a period of big change, and I think I've already said technology can be very disruptive. Look at the places where it has been disruptive. Look at traditional sort of shopping, and the fact that shopping has changed completely because we all now use Amazon and online stores to buy things. I think that kind of seismic change is going to come into education and training, and the government recognises this and wants training providers to be ready for this. So I think there's quite a lot of movement. But just as a little story, I was watching my 12-year-old daughter Sally go out of the door this morning. She was going to school, and she had a rucksack on her back that must have weighed about 20 pounds. And I thought, why on earth are we doing this these days? Why has she got a rucksack full of books, of things that she brings home every night and takes back into school? And it's that kind of sort of dated approach to education and things that up till now we've never questioned, which I think learning technology is really going to change. And I'm going to use an example here, because there's an absolutely wonderful website which I'm going to recommend to people, which is called the Khan Academy. That's Khan, Khan. And it's www.khanacademy.org. Now, what that is it's a website of something like 2,500 videos. And it was started by a man called Salman Khan, who was a hedge fund manager in the States. He started tutoring his nephews, and he started doing this in person, but then because they were across the other side of the United States, he started doing it by video. And his nephews actually said to him, "Do you know what, Uncle? We prefer it when you do it by video rather than when you do it in person." And when you think about it, the reason is obvious. He was trying to show them, for instance, how to do mathematical equations. They could stop that video whenever they wanted, rewind, and listen again. And they didn't have to say to him, "I'm sorry, Uncle, I didn't understand that. Could you say it again?" So for them, it was much better than him teaching it in reality, in person. Well, since then, he's gone on to create this website with, as I say, thousands of videos. It's a wonderful resource, and if you've got kids who are in school and you'd like to find extra ways of tuition and to improve particularly their mathematics, but there's also videos on things like history and English. If you'd like to help them with that, then the Khan Academy is a great way of doing it. And the other thing that's very clever about it is what they've done is they've set up that, although it's an educational website, they've done what kids like. So if you do one of those videos and you do a test after it, you get rewards, you get a badge, and you can see how many badge points you're winning. So it's a bit like playing a game. And that's a really interesting thing in technology now, this idea of gamification, as they call it, bringing game playing into education to make it better.
I watched a documentary about this actually recently, about video games actually making our children making education more interactive. Is that the scope for interactive technology at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a really interesting study that shows that if you read something, you retain about 10% of that. So you remember about 10% of it. If you listen to somebody, you retain about 15 to 20%. So those are our traditional teaching methods. If you do something, you retain about 90%. So the game makes you do something. It makes you go back over what you've just learned and do something that makes you remember it. So it's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, I remember I watched on this documentary, it gave an example of this child who, she was playing a video game and she went into the classroom the next day and she knew how a medieval slingshot worked because she was playing it on a video game. Yes. She could explain all the technical aspects of this slingshot by actually seeing it and doing it through virtual reality. So so that's the way the technology should be going.
It is. And the thing that's going to be really disruptive, and by disruptive I mean in a good way, because it's going to help people to learn better, is what people are talking about now is this idea around a flipped classroom. Okay? Flipped classroom is an interesting concept. It literally means that you do your education the other way around. So whereas at the moment you go into school and you're taught, and then you go home and do your homework, the idea is that in future what you might do is you actually learn at home using video, animation, games, all sorts of things like that. And then you go into school for what will be more like individual tuition or project work to work with others. Because let's not forget, a really important part of education is how you get kids to interact with each other and collaborate with each other. So none of this is about kids just sitting in a room on their own being educated, because that wouldn't work. So we use the best of technology and we combine it with the best of what really makes people learn when they get together and they do projects together. So this idea of the flipped classroom is a really important one, and Salman Khan of the Khan Academy is now working with several schools in the US to put this model into place. And if you think about that, the real big change there is that teachers are less concerned with teaching their subject. They're more concerned with mentoring and coaching the kids. Because if we're using video, we could get the best teachers in the world to teach that subject through video. You know, and the government's always going on about wanting inspiring teachers. Okay, well, the really inspiring teachers could be captured on video, and the kids can learn from them, and they can take, you know, small tests, do games, all sorts of things that helps put that into place, really gets that learning into their heads. And so that's where I think the next big revolution is going to be in learning.
Sounds really, really interesting. So Phil, at university we had something called Blackboard. Is there anything in the pipeline to kind of like develop that further?
Yeah, Blackboard is what's called a learning platform or a virtual learning environment. So you log into it and that's where you get your courses and the resources that help you with your course. Now, interestingly, those things are going to change quite a lot, and they're going to change because of something called cloud technology, which you might have heard of. Cloud technology up until recently referred to just being able to store things in the internet, basically on servers. So instead of being on your own computer, it was on a server. And that's got quite a few things for convenience, because, you know, if something happens to your computer, it's always there on the internet, and that was fine. But again, there's another stage of cloud computing, which is where not just storage, but actually your software, in other words, your programs, are going to be on the cloud. Now, the implication of that is that your devices that you use don't need to be as powerful as they once were. So whereas at one time we were used to seeing the big computer on a desk, now we're much more used to seeing phones, for instance, tablets, very slim and very light devices. And that's because most of the computing actually happens in the cloud. Now, the implications for this are really important for people, because it means that they don't have to spend so much money on hardware. They're always connected. They can get to their files and they can get to their programs wherever they are. And I'll just use an example here from my own background, because in 1997 I worked in Namibia in Southwest Africa. And Namibia is an interesting country because it's got a very low population, only 1.5 million people, and it's mainly desert. So at the time in 1997 there was hardly any internet connectivity. There was some, but there was a bit. Yeah. Now there's fantastic internet connectivity and wireless connectivity. And what that means is that a country like Namibia can catch up very, very quickly in terms of education, because they're not spending so much money on devices, and they can have sort of national learning banks, which are then can be accessed anywhere in the country. So again, that's a way that learning technology is really going to change things. And let's stop thinking about learning technology only happening on computers, because one of the big things in learning technology is learning through your mobile phone and learning through your tablet, and that's going to be a big change.
So Phil, what should our listeners be looking out for when they're looking at cloud technology then?
Well, what it means is they've got a far bigger choice of device that they can use, and tablets are very pleasant to use. Two things I would say: if you're buying tablet, and if you're buying tablets for your kids, then they're great devices for consuming, for using what's on the web. If you really want to create something, you're probably still looking at least a laptop. But you can now get Chromebooks, which are only £200 compared to £450 at least for a laptop. And what they should be looking at is things like Google Apps. Now, as a company, we don't use any Microsoft products or anything like that, any software. We use Google Apps, because in Google Apps, it's all free for the individual. And that is a great example of cloud computing, because you don't download Google Apps onto your computer, you just use it on the cloud. And I can start a document, close my computer down, and go back to it wherever I want, because it exists on the cloud, not on my computer. And so I think listeners should be thinking about how they're using that type of software, because it is a great event. Things are free that used to cost a lot of money, and you can save a lot of money that way.
That's great. Okay, so we've been having a really interesting chat with Phil today about educational technology. Phil, so if any of our listeners want to get in contact with you to talk about technology a bit more, or to maybe get some business from you, do you have any contact details?
Yeah, if I give my email first, it's Phil Aspden. I'll have to spell that PhilaSpden at eGenius.limited.uk. I'd be delighted to hear from people. And also my telephone number is 07812 044786. And if you want to look on www.egenius.limited.uk, you'll see a lot more information about us there. I'd be delighted to talk to people about learning technology.
Okay, you've been great today, Phil. Thanks for having a chat with us today. If you need to get in contact with WAS Community Radio, check out our website at www.wascommunityradio.com. You can email us at wascommunityradio@gmail.com, or if you need to give us a call, call us on 0161 839 9817. Check out our Facebook at WAS Community Radio, or you can tweet us at WAS Radio 122. But a great talk with Phil today. Thanks for listening.